Welcome, Frank, to Wealth Matters podcast. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Hey, Frank, I have already put a bio about you, but could you please repeat what do you do?
Absolutely. I, along with my partner Dave Reynolds, we're the fifth largest owners of RV parks and mobile home parks in the U.S. So we've got about 20,000 lots strewn out over about 25 different states.
Wow. So how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for now about 25 years approximately.
That's amazing. So you are a veteran, and I'm looking forward to the episode.
Sure, absolutely. No problem.
So how did you get started in real estate?
Well, let's see. I went to Stanford University. I got an AB in economics.
No way. Stanford,
yes,
huh?
I did.
So
Yeah,
I'm local. I live in San Francisco Bay Area.
Well, I was there every weekend between 1979 and 1982. That's where we would go as a dorm every weekend.
That's amazing.
But then I got out, and I was going to start a business for a year as a resume builder to try and go to Stanford Business School or Harvard or somewhere like that. So I started a billboard business from scratch off my coffee table, and I never went back to graduate school. I built that for 14 years until I was the largest private owner of billboards in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I sold that to a public company and started buying RV and mobile home parks, and I've been doing that ever since.
That's amazing. So I want to jump into the meat of this podcast because I heard about RV park and I'm like, oh, that is something. So why invest in RV parks?
Well, there's several reasons. First reason is RV parks are on the right side of just about every mega trend in the U.S. There's 10,000 baby boomers retiring per day, many of which are buying RVs and traveling around in retirement. So that's one item. It's also properly positioned for millennials. In fact, millennials now make up or tie or even beat out baby boomers as the number one group age-wise in the RV industry. That's because millennials are really into living small, into bonding with people. They love the outdoors. And so they've become a huge customer base that came pretty much out of nowhere. You also have the regular mega trends of the fact that, gas prices are down or at least reasonable, so people still use their RVs substantially.
Right.
And RV sales right now are the highest they've ever been in American history. They go up
really?
every year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So basically, the more RVs on the road and the more nights people are in them, the more occupancy there is in RV parks. Meanwhile, at the same time, you still have most of the original RV park builders as owners. So you kind of have this generational transference from what are called the greatest generation and the silent generation individuals who have their biological clock ticking to younger generations. And that means you can get really good pricing, and they will often carry the financing. And then finally, you have the fact that many of these older moms and pops never understood nor got involved with the internet. So they've not been properly marketing their RV parks since the internet began. So those are the key reasons, Alpesh.
That's awesome. So would you be able to compare RV parks to, let's say, multifamily apartment buildings investing or single family residences?
Sure. Now, first off, they're very different animals because RV parks are pretty much a luxury industry, recreational industry. Apartments are obviously a necessity. You got to have it.
Right.
But the key economic differences are the cap rates in which you can buy RV parks are probably double that of the average apartment complex. So whereas, apartments, you have a very small spread between cap rate and interest rate, RV parks, you typically have a very large spread. And the larger the spread, the larger the cash on cash return. So the returns are clearly superior on RV parks than they would be to the traditional apartment. So that's item one. Item two, you typically cannot get as good pricing or lending on apartments simply because typically apartments, you're not buying from a mom and pop today, you're buying from a business. But RV parks are still mom and pop. So you can get really good terms if the seller wants to, if the seller likes you, which we call bonding. Then finally, you have the issue that RV parks are often the ones you look at buying are terribly mismanaged compared to the average apartment. I mean, the average apartment owner is much more sophisticated, and particularly much more sophisticated on the internet. So those to me would be the primary differences.
Got it. What is your personal criteria to invest in RV parks? What do you see?
There's several things you got to look at when you're looking to buy an RV park. The first one would be infrastructure. So you don't want to buy something that doesn't work. And a lot of moms and pops, when they built them wrong because they didn't know what they were doing and there was no inspector to tell them, and or what they've got is really, really worn out and needs replacement. And bear in mind, if you have the wrong thing wrong with an RV park, the infrastructure repair could be as much as the RV park.
Oh, really?
On private water, private sewer, or electrical issues. So you got to make sure what you're buying works, because last thing you want to do is buy an RV park and then find out that it has some terrible thing wrong with it. Another key item you're looking at is obviously the location. There's two types of RV parks. There's what's called overnighter and another thing called destination. Overnighter are the ones you see when you drive down the highway, on the side of the highway, sometimes in the middle of nowhere. You'll see like a Coa campground. And the only reason it exists is people driving, let's say, from Texas to Minnesota, stop there on the way to their destination. So it's kind of like a Holiday Inn Express, like an overnight hotel kind of situation, right? So that's that variety. Now the destinations, those are the ones that are in really great areas, and people are going there and they're going to stay for maybe 1 week or 2 weeks, right? And so you've got to have a location that's attractive for people in those situations.
Right.
So those are the two types of locations that you've got. Obviously, destination is far superior to overnight at this point. And so then you've also got the finally, and probably the most important, are the economics. So in any deal you're looking at, you've got to have a good spread. You've got to have good solid numbers you can hang your hat on when you're buying it, to make sure that you're buying what you think you're buying. And obviously the key item for anyone buying these things is to make money. So you've got to have the desired cap rate on cash and cash return. So I'd say those are probably the three main items.
I see. So do you focus on destination type of RVs or overnighter?
Yes. No, I think anyone in America right now looking at investing in this really wants to focus, if they can, on destination, because destination, those are the properties that are the most valuable. Those are the properties that have the most consistent revenue. Right. Because what happens is, with the way gas prices are and people and everything else, people really, they want to go to a destination, the fastest, easiest one they can get to where they want to be and spend the most nights. So what makes destination parks work is the exact same function that makes the overnighter not work. So back when people were driving huge distances, let's say if you go back 10 years ago or 20 years ago perhaps, then you had people, when gas prices were really insanely cheap, they would just kind of meander across America. So they'd say, hey, let's go out in our RV on a trip.
Right.
Let's go to a different city every night or something, right? So the overnighter industry boomed during that period because people weren't even really going to destinations. They were just driving for the sheer heck of it. They were waking up in a different spot every night. The problem is now, with gas prices higher and just the way that older baby boomers and even millennials want to work it now, is they don't want to do a lot of driving. In fact, when you ask people with RVs, the number one thing they hate the most, it's driving. They found the number one thing that most RVers like more than anything in the entire world is cooking outdoors. That is the number one item, right? It's never been driving, stopping, connecting water, connecting sewer, disconnecting, and driving again. So the very forces out there in the marketplace today would say that definitely destination is where it's at, not overnighter. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do well with an overnighter. If it's a really, really good location, you can buy really, really cheap, because mom and pop have done a terrible job of managing it. So I'm not saying that you can't do overnighter, but if you could choose between overnighter and destination, you would always go destination.
I see. So what happens to RV park when there is a downturn?
Well, that's a great question, Alfish. You know, we just had one, right? I mean, the Great Recession,
Yes. Yeah.
2007. The impact was very minimal.
Oh,
Here's why
really?
the impact
Nice.
was. Yeah, here's why the impact is minimal. Number one, you know, the baby, the not the well, yeah, the baby boomers are retiring 10,000 people a day. They
Right.
don't have jobs, right? They're
Uh-huh.
retiring, so they have no interest in going to work, and they don't really care if we're in a recession or a depression, because as long as Social Security keeps paying out those checks, they don't really care, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that group doesn't care. Then you have the millennials. Well, the millennials, as you know, they're also not really money motivated. So
Right.
they highly prize vacation time, bonding time. They're not going to not go do something just because, oh gosh, the world's in recession and the Dow Jones is down a little bit. So they're finding the RV crowd is fairly recession resistant. Also remember that RV travel is considered to be the least expensive form of travel.
Yes.
So, you know, whereas in a
That's correct.
recession, the people are going to say, oh, I'm not going to travel to Europe. Well, yeah, because traveling to Europe is insanely expensive. It's going to cost you $10,000 to go to Europe. But you know, when people say, well, gosh, we're in a recession, but yet I want to have a vacation, that just makes more people want to do RV, right? Then they just go
Uh-huh.
rent an RV, buy an expensive RV. So really, recession is not a big issue for the industry. I mean, that was proven by the 2007 recession.
So what did you see during 2007 recession? Did the RV park market stay stagnant, slowed down or a little bit, or it went up?
The only impact from the 2007, which was the forces were already in play before 2007, was damage to the overnighter segment.
I see.
Because when people had less money to spend, they would just go to something they could drive to close that they'd want to stay at, and they would stay there, right? You know, if you look at the RV and the cost of the RV and what you can crimp on, I mean, you can't. I mean, insurance is set, right? So the really only operational cost that's variable is gasoline. So if you were saying, oh gosh, I'm going all ways of miserly this year, the only thing you would do is not drive as much. And of course, that when you don't drive as much, it helps the overnight. I mean, it helps the destination, but it hurts the overnighter. And so, you know, overnighter communities, which were already in decline anyway, because the taste of the RV users has changed over time, they got even further whammied by the Great Recession. I don't know. I haven't even read any articles of any impact on the destination. In fact, for all I know, the destination actually went up. But if there was any casualty, it was in the number of nights of occupancy in the overnighter parks.
And so you mentioned about overnighter and destination, and I'm not sure if there is the third segment to this as well, like people who just live in RV, like a mobile home park, and they are like long term. So do you see them as well? How do you treat
Well,
those kind of parks?
yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, Alpesh, because what happens is, you know, that third segment is a little bit like Uber, because you're not supposed to do it technically by U.S.
Right.
law. In other words,
Oh, really?
RVs
Oh,
are,
okay.
yeah, mobile homes are built under a thing called HUD code, which means the
Right.
HUD has supervised and approved the plans, and it's
Correct.
approved by HUD for permanent occupancy. But RVs do not fall under HUD. They fall under another code under HUD that's called SWANSEA is the short name for it, and that is for those things which are built for temporary use. So HUD allows RV manufacturers to build RVs to a much lighter code, because you're not supposed to live in them full time, only maybe a couple weeks of the year. But as we all know, people have been living in them forever, all the way back to the
Yes.
1930s.
Yep.
So the government can't police it, right? There's no way they can police how many days a year you're in your RV. It's impossible.
Right.
So they tell you, well, you're not supposed to be there full time, but people do anyway, because they don't listen to the government, and they probably don't need to listen to the government, because the government is wrong most of the time anyway, right? So,
correct.
but it's kind of like Uber, because when Uber came out, a lot of people, including myself, said, well, this can't be. This is illegal, because taxi cabs have to pay big money to have those taxi cab medallions. And here you have guys who didn't pay any money for a medallion, and they're doing a taxi cab. Well, the government turned its head because people liked it. And even though it was probably wrong, they said, oh, well, okay, I guess we'll ignore it. And you had that same thing with RVs. So no one polices how many days you spend, and they know you're living in them. I mean, all those RVs you see that a person's been in one spot now for 10 years, everyone knows they're living in it full time, but nobody does anything about it. And so actually those users can be found in two places. One, as you mentioned, mobile home parks, but the other is right in RV parks. I mean, there's many destination RV parks that have a certain percent, it might be as high as 30%, which live in there full time. I just drove some of our properties. I went through one, and I drive the competition when I'm there. I went in one in Indiana, and this one in Indiana, if you go to it in the depths of winter when no RVs are on the road, it's always got 30% occupancy. And it's the same people every time.
Nice.
So those people have chosen to retire there. Now, I'll also throw out to you, there's somewhat of a stigma on mobile home parks in the U.S.
Right.
But there's not any stigma on RV parks. So some people, even though they could live in the mobile home park theoretically cheaper in their RV, they won't do it because of the stigma against mobile home park. So they don't mind telling their friends, I live in an RV park in my RV.
Right.
Okay, that's considered upscale, so that's like high end.
Yeah.
So that's like saying, yeah, I flew in on my private plane. Or you can say, I live in a mobile home park, which is like saying I drove in on my dirt bike or something.
Right.
So that's another reason that falls into their decision making.
That was great. So do you focus on certain markets right now, and why?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because, there's the Northern America, where in RV world, nobody wants to be in the northern states. Like, let's just take the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Right.
And we have properties in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. All right. When the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a beautiful, wonderful place when it's warm. It is a hideous, horrible, terrifying place in the winter. You can often have 12 to 13 feet of snow over the winter. So, and it never melts. So, then you look at Texas. We have a very, very large RV park on the border between Mexico and Texas. And it's warm there year round. And we have some degree of residents who come from the north in the winter, but then we have others who are there pretty much year round. So the southern RV parks, they have much greater occupancy and much more stable occupancy than the north does. So that's why many people have always preferred buying in the south. In fact, if you look at the early origins of RV industry, you'll notice it's primarily in California and Florida for the simple reason they were warm year round.
That is correct. Right?
Yep. So that's probably the biggest item. Now, obviously, the idea of destinations themselves have changed with many Americans over time. So, destinations that were nature oriented, which might have been hot in the 70s, now have often been replaced by access to other forms of entertainment like Disneyland or Universal Studios. So some of it is just based on the taste of Americans at the moment. And of course, the RV industry is in this strange moment when the industry is made up of young people and old people simultaneously. So there's no set perfect destination that appeals to both groups. I mean, if you had to wake up and own one RV park in America, perhaps the one you'd want is the one that's next to Disneyland. It's the only remaining RV park for Disneyland. They get $75 a night, and Disneyland sends them all their customers, and they're full every day of the year.
Right.
So that would be one. If you look at the largest RV park in the United States, that's out in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area.
Yep.
I think it's over, I forgot how many thousand units it is now. Like, some insane number, 4,000 units, some crazy.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
Okay. But again, it's relatively warm there, and it has ocean frontage.
Right.
So I think if you're choosing between locations, most people would probably favor things that are warm. I think that's the most important item. So warmth is important. But again, there's a lot of destinations people enjoy. They'll enjoy being in some cities, like Austin or Nashville. They enjoy being near man-made amusements like Disneyland, Universal, Holiday Village up in Indiana, things like that. And then you finally have natural things which attract them because of the scenery and the nature and that type of deal. So those are probably the three main classifications of it. But the only main difference between them is the temperature.
This is awesome. I'm thoroughly enjoying this show. Let's take a quick break. Welcome back to Wealth Matters Podcast. I'm chatting with Frank, who is a 25-year industry veteran, buying and selling and holding RV parks. Frank, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts about RV parks. So I have the next question, and this could be a selfish question because I have been looking into this as well. So what are some of the gotchas investor needs to keep in mind while investing in RV parks?
Okay, well, the first gotcha I think you would have to acknowledge is that, you know, your total investment is a combination of both what you pay and then what capital you have to put into the property.
Right.
And a lot of people get lulled into buying something because they think it's really cheap, but they don't realize how much work it needs, right? You see that on people who, like, for example, buy classic cars and they say, oh, this classic car would be $50,000 for a Jaguar XKE, but here's one for only $25,000. But what they don't know is it needs an engine for $10,000, it needs an interior for $5,000, it's covered in rust, and when you get done fixing it all up, you spent more than $50,000, and you had all that risk and effort in it. You could have bought the one that was finished for less. So one big gotcha is don't sell yourself short. Don't kid yourself into believing you got a good buy on something that needs a lot of repairs. So you got to know the total cost of the asset and all the repair to make it happen. Another gotcha for many people is they get too misled simply by the glimpse of big profits, and they get involved in things that they shouldn't have gotten involved in, right? And
that's me.
If you see an RV, I'm sorry?
That's me.
Okay, well, right. In other words, if you see an RV park and you say, oh gosh, that's a 25% cap rate or something, you know, it's very possible that there's something horribly wrong with it.
Right.
And so don't be blinded by this idea that it's got a high rate of return. You know, most RV parks typically trade in a range of probably around a 8 or 9 cap for the best of it, up to something in all the way up to the mid-teens. So when you see things that look insanely too high in the cap rate, like 50%, you know there's something wrong with it. And so just be very, very careful on that construction where you just see dollar signs and you don't look through the dollar signs and see the reality of what you're getting. Obviously, the selection of location is extremely important. Also, when you're looking at mom and pop, you know, mom and pop, when they're trying to sell you the RV park, there's some degree of a leap of faith on what they tell you the occupancy is.
Right.
Look for some byproduct of humans to help you put a handle on that. Let me give you an example. If you're looking at an RV park and you know the current occupancy right now because you can physically see it, and RV parks supply all the power. One thing they do, they give you all your electricity for free. How much power is that RV park pulling right now? And if you come to find out, let's say your typical RV is pulling an average of $100 a month of power, right? Then that means every RV in there should be pulling roughly $3 a day of power. So if you look at that power bill and you add that up and you divide such that you end up with $3 a day, you should be able to tell roughly what the occupancy was. Not rocket science, but kind of sort of what the occupancy was, so that you can see if mom and pop are lying to you. Because they're going to try and tell you, oh yeah, I was completely full all last year. But if they were completely full, you'd have a giant electrical bill. A lot of moms and pops don't realize when they make up these fibs that you know, a smart buyer can figure out the fib. I mean, one thing is the power. Another is if you're on city water, what the water use was.
Right, water, I was going to say that.
Yeah, there's lots of little algorithms that will help guide you to whether or not that occupancy was there or not. Because oftentimes mom and pop will try to mislead you terribly. I mean, basically, I think the biggest item I see as a gotcha for many RV people is when they know better, but yet they press forward because they either really want to buy something or they just get way too over psyched up on yields that just don't exist. I mean, most people who call me have a problem with their RV park, they already know in talking to me what the mistake was, and they knew better at the time, and they just did it. And we call that item in buying your gut instinct. So if your gut instinct is telling you I shouldn't probably buy this, but another part of your personality is saying, oh no, you got to buy it. It's an incredible rate of return. You want to listen to your smart side, your more conservative side on the stuff, because I find most people who've had problems, they knew on the onset they'd be screwed up, and they shouldn't have even done it, but they did it. You have to really often listen to your gut instinct.
Yeah, those are some great advice. So how can investors figure this out? Some of these things you mentioned about water, sewer, etc., those are amazing. So does the book by Dave Reynolds, which is
yes,
how
correct.
to buy, sell, and operate RV parks and campgrounds, what does that book talk about?
You know, that book goes over my partner Dave is probably one of the top RV park buyers and sellers in American history, as far as just the sheer quantity of the ones, his depth of experience, because he often, all the early RV parks, he would live in them, self-manage it. And so that book is extremely granular in detail. I know a lot of people write books which are all kinds of fluff and cheerleading. This book has no fluff or cheerleading. It's completely by the book, by the number, how to buy, sell, and operate RV parks and campgrounds. And there's no filler in it. So,
yeah.
Dave is an accountant by training.
Nice.
So he's not very verbose. It's all basically he doesn't put a word in anything unless it needs to be in there. So it's just chock full of information. It's like an encyclopedia.
Yeah, and I love numbers. I'm a numbers guy. So yeah.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to reading that book. I know I'm receiving a copy soon, so I'll let you know. Let my listeners know as well what I think of the book.
We've never had anyone whoever got the book who later did not say it was the best book they ever read on the topic. So
looking forward to it.
If you got any review less than that, I will be disappointed.
No, I'm looking forward to it for sure. So I'm going to throw you a curveball on this last question because you have 25 years of experience. People are talking about recession coming and whatnot. So can you share with us, what do you think of the current market cycle, where we are in the cycle, and what do you think in next year or two holds for us?
Sure. Yeah, Alpesh, when I sold my billboard business back in 96, they offered me at the time to stay on as general manager, but I had no interest at all, nor did I have any interest in ever building any more billboards, because the golden moment of that industry had passed.
Right.
And I knew it, and I didn't want to get back in it because I thought that the golden age was over, right? It's kind of like the end of the silent movie era. Who wants to be a producer of silent movies when people want talkies? So, the RV park industry, the reason we keep buying them and own so many is because we don't feel in any way that the industry has passed yet. Now, it will pass in the future.
Yes.
What right now, what creates the opportunity is not the actual dynamics of the demand and all that. That I don't see that changing. The big issue is being able to buy from the moms and pops who are not very good operators often and who have no idea of using the internet for marketing. That's really the big opportunity. So the big opportunity is buying an RV park from a very nice older couple that build it from scratch. Typically they may be in their 70s or 80s, sometimes older, and they're kind of worn out, and they were really good operators, decades back. Now they've gotten older, they've lost a lot of energy, and most importantly, the internet just ran all over them.
Right.
So basically, the RV park across the street that they used to have more occupancy than that one, now he's full, and they're half empty because he's into the internet and he knows how to have a website and a Google search and all those things.
SEO,
and they don't even know what Google is. Exactly,
right.
And they're sitting there with a sign on the freeway and flyers in the tourist center and saying, "Gosh darn it, how does he always beat me?" Well, he beats you because he's doing the internet.
Yeah.
So right now you have this unique opportunity of buying stuff relatively cheaply, often with seller financing directly from the mom and pop, with this big built-in way to improve revenues day one, called, using the internet, SEO, just using modern stuff that they didn't have. So that's what really creates the opportunity right now. So then obviously the opportunity will end or diminish greatly as those people sell off or die off, right? So it gives you a window of opportunity, probably maybe as much as a decade before all the early form original moms and pops are all gone. But that's what really creates the opportunity. Because RV park attendance is based on number of RVs. Since there's so many million RVs now privately owned, people are going to use them. So I don't see that ever as changing. I don't think one day people are going to wake up and say, oh, I don't like RVs anymore, I'm throwing mine in the trash can. Mainly because you have the biggest demand right now is coming from young people. But I do think it will never come again. Once all of these older moms and pops have sold off and moved on, that will never come back. And when that goes, then the buying opportunity is over, because you can no longer buy parks that are not properly being run at low prices and with seller financing.
So that was some great advice, Frank. How can my listeners reach out to you?
Well, Alpesh, they can go, if you go to rvparkuniversity.com, that is the number one way to find me and find what we do and write about on the RV park industry. And also I produce a newsletter every month, which I spend a whole lot of time writing to produce. So that's also available for those who'd like to read that. And again, I'm always out there. If you can find me online, I'm constantly writing on the industry and talking about the industry. So I'm certainly not hard to find.
That's awesome. And that's how I found you. I read one of your article and I was impressed, and I said, okay, I need to reach out to Frank and connect with him. So definitely I'll spell out that if you want to reach out to Frank, go to www.rvparkuniversity.com. Thank you so much, Frank, for your time today. I thoroughly enjoyed the episode.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here. And I appreciate everybody. And we'll talk to everyone again soon.
Have a good one.